So then for me, the question is not really what habits should I have, but what life do I want to create through my patterns, through the things that I do every day. And here's where it gets really interesting from what I'm seeing, because so many of us, self included, are trying to control our energy and environments through routines and productivity systems and schedules that let us crank out as much as we can. And like I said in past weeks, they can work for a little while and we can feel organized and efficient, like we have a lot figured out. But as soon as something happens, right? We have a kid get sick, work explodes, something unexpected happens, which is life. We start to realize how much energy it actually takes to hold all of these routines together. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We are continuing our exploration of wellness culture and how it has failed us in so many ways. So wellness and then the self-care culture. And I'm going to be talking today and kind of rounding out these 4 weeks, talking about habits and routines and talking more about why we actually need ecosystems, what that actually means, and how it can help us to really live a more fulfilled, deeper, and satisfying life. But first, I wanted to start off with a little celebration. I mean, there's so many things that we can't celebrate right now, but it's the small wins. And I have felt like February has felt just a little bit lighter than January, hasn't it? I don't know. Is it me? We've had some cracks here in Chicago and like the Arctic tundra. And I don't know, the news cycle has felt a little bit less heavy. And I can just feel myself getting ready for some type of spring reawakening. The urge to clean out and clean up is coming. And just starting to make a change, maybe in a different way than we try to do in like the new year around January. But speaking of New Year's, happy Lunar New Year. A Taiwanese colleague of mine was telling me that if you're a horse, it is the year of the fire horse. This is going to be a really powerful year for you. The energy is strong. And as a horse myself, I am curious to what that is going to mean. What ways can I work with the energy and the momentum in this coming year, and what opportunities might present themselves? So I'm excited. I don't know. I'm feeling good. Okay. So today, like I mentioned, we're talking about habits and, maybe habits, not really even habits so much as energy, right? And how we move with our energy throughout the day. And in Buddhism, there's this understanding that habits actually aren't just behaviors as we think about them. They're the patterns that literally can shape the way that we live our lives and even form our reality. So the Tibetan word is bakchak, and this is the idea of these little imprints that are left on your mind by repeated actions. So every time you do something, you're carving a little groove into your brain that's a little bit deeper. You're like, think about it as a habitual pattern, right? You're making it easier to do that thing again and harder to do something different. And this can be both positive and negative. But when we think about it like this, habits aren't just what we do, they actually are who we become, how they can shape how we perceive what we are, what we notice, what feels possible for us in our lives. So then for me, the question is not really what habits should I have, but what life do I want to create through my patterns, through the things that I do every day. And here's where it gets really interesting from what I'm seeing, because so many of us, self included, are trying to control our energy and environments through routines and productivity systems and schedules that let us crank out as much as we can. And like I said in past weeks, they can work for a little while and we can feel organized and efficient, like we have a lot figured out. But as soon as something happens, right? We have a kid get sick, work explodes, something unexpected happens, which is life. We start to realize how much energy it actually takes to hold all of these routines together. And typically the whole thing just falls apart. And what I've come to the conclusion is that what we're trying to do is optimize a super fragile system that we've created. And that super fragile system is not supporting us. And what we need is something I refer to as an ecosystem, right? An ecosystem in this sense is something that holds you up when you need help, not something that is going to crack under pressure. So when we talk about these systems as fragile, what I'm saying is like they require a lot of perfect conditions, right? And they fall apart under stress. And the reality is that nowadays we're under a lot of stress, somewhat constantly. But when you think about ecosystems, they are more resilient and they can adapt and they can hold us a lot better when things get chaotic. So what happens when we invest too much, right, in propping up these fragile systems or these unsustainable systems is that we end up just letting it go when something happens. When the kids get sick or we have a deadline or we're just like too tired of holding it all together, what do we usually do? Like skip a day, we'll just go back tomorrow. We don't need it. I can just like get away with like 3 days without doing it. But then tomorrow is also busy, and then the day after that. And then before you know it, these habits or routines are gone. And then we also, like I've been saying before, put it on ourselves that somehow we have failed. But it's the routines aren't working for us because they're optimized for these ideal conditions. And especially in how we consume other people's routines, right? Like looking at all these perfect routines on Instagram or on whatever media we're consuming. That's not real life. Or they're built on the assumption that life is like this perfect, predictable landscape and that we have control over everything. But obviously that's not real life, right? Real life is messy and unpredictable and full of interruptions and emergencies and things we didn't plan for. And if your entire system or routine collapses the moment conditions aren't perfect, then that's not sustainability, and that's fragility. And I feel like that's where wellness culture has really misled us. And it's just selling us optimization, trying to be more efficient, trying to be more perfect, trying to be more controlled. But that's not what we need. We need true resilience. And resilience doesn't come from perfect routines. It comes from developing ecosystems that sustain us. So what is this ecosystem I speak of, right? It might seem like a fancy word, but it's just like think about a natural ecosystem. And that's really where I derived it from, right? In a natural ecosystem, it's just a community of living things working together in a specific environment, but it's not just one element, right? It relies on multiple elements supporting each other, and it's typically incredibly diverse. So if one part struggles or can't, maintain a drought or a flood or what other parts of the ecosystem can help it. It can help it thrive. If conditions change, the system can adapt. And that's something that we need to think more about in how to support our lives. Not just one perfect morning routine or multiple practices that we have to like put all this energy into, but it's elements that work together to hold us, no matter what life throws at us, and it's going to throw a lot. So I've been referring to this a lot as the essential ecosystem, which is really the specific combination of practices that keep you sustainable, right? It differs for everybody, but it's not just someday when life is calm and I can do the workout and do the the, microneedle or massage or, it's for right now. And there are things that we can hopefully integrate into our lives starting now and then growing over time. So for the Groundwork Collective, I particularly work with 4 integrated elements. The first one is meditation, which I really think about as like the soil, right? The base layer for everything that kind of like interweaves into all of the different elements. But it's really building that, I would say, like mental and heart capacity to be present with difficult things. That's how I view the meditation piece. And then movement, which is really reconnecting with embodied wisdom, the body of wisdom in our physical bodies. Community, which is sustaining authentic connection. And then creativity, which is this ability to access insight beyond analytical thinking, because there is so much wisdom and activity and lots of projections that are all happening in our subconscious. And all 4 of these activities help to process that subconscious, which is one of the biggest steps to actually making change in our lives. But the most important thing, that these aren't like separate practices that you're kind of like adding on top of a super full schedule. I think about it as an integrated framework that allows us to pull different levers depending on our lives. And what makes it an ecosystem as opposed to this like fragile routine is that it's flexible. So if you can't do one element today, you can still find others that you can fit in that will hold you for that day. They're adaptable, so they can meet you where you are. And there's so many different ways to engage in the different elements. They're integrated, so they work together. And each one, this is the best part, supports and strengthens the other. So each one adds to the other. So it has this multiplying effect. And it's also sustainable. So we don't rush, into doing these things. It is really like we're doing this over the long haul. We're building capacity over time rather than depleting us in the short term, which is often what, trying to build new habits in the way that we think about it does. And I did want to talk a little bit about why I think meditation alone isn't enough. Because when I started the Groundwork Collective, like meditation was, again, it's the soil. So it was actually something I was thinking, I'll just teach meditation. And I have done that. Taught meditation to different groups around the globe. I've practiced for 22 years. But something that I've really embodied and believe strongly is that seated meditation is not actually enough to make change. Because you can have a solid meditation practice and still be completely disconnected from your body, which is it's really important to be connected. You can meditate every day and you can still be incredibly isolated from others and trying to build this on your own. And you can also sit for hours and never access creative wisdom that lives beyond your analytical mind. And in addition to all that, all of these things are fun. So they're enjoyable. So I think that other ways that we get caught up and like building new habits is like, oh, I have to do this or I have to do that. But if we can imbue playfulness and joy, which for some reason I shy away from those words because maybe they're not serious enough. But if we actually embrace those things in our lives, these elements are not only helpful, they become a joyous part of our lives, which we can look forward to. But I actually came to this realization somewhat the hard way, because for years I relied way too heavily on my meditation practice to give me all of the holistic benefit. And I wasn't getting everything I need. I did get a lot. I got mental clarity. I had so much more presence, the ability to work with my mind, but I was living a little too much in my head, right? I didn't know how to listen to my body in a real way, like in a real communication with my body. I often, sometimes guilty of still doing this, but I would often push through exhaustion because my mind would say I could do it. I mistook mental discipline. I pushed through exhaustion because my mind said I should. And I really mistook mental discipline, which is important, but it's different from real capacity because real capacity isn't exhausting. And to be honest, I was also pretty lonely. I was doing all of this inner work in isolation, thinking that that was the path, that I just needed to sit more, practice harder, figure it out. But humans are not wired that way. We are wired for connection. We build capacity in relationship. We hold each other through difficulty. Sometimes the human connection, yes, we hold ourselves through difficulty, and sometimes we even create that difficulty. So I'm not denying that sometimes that connection is challenging in and of itself, but we will never grow in isolation. We have to do it with others. Okay. And then finally, there was a whole dimension of wisdom I realized I wasn't accessing because I wasn't engaging my creative practice in a grounded way. So the parts of me that knew my thinking, the parts of me that my thinking mind couldn't reach, the part that needed to make things, to engage, to play, those did not exist when I was so solely focused on my meditation practice. But then when I started to really integrate all of these things together, things really started to change. Not overnight, not all at once, not dramatically, but I myself became more resilient, and I really remember waking up one day, I'm like, oh wow, like some of those things that used to bug me so much, they just don't bug me anymore. And I found myself more capable of showing up for the work that mattered to me because I wasn't trying to do it all with one practice. I had multiple supports working together that were also simultaneously teaching me where my limits were, which is also so important. So when we feel supported, we also gain slowly but surely this grounded confidence, right? Not this confidence where we're always feeling like shaky and we feel like we need to prove ourselves. It's a confidence that just knows and has no problem communicating that gently to others. So that is also what we build when we allow ourselves to be fully resourced. So how can we think about fully resourcing ourselves with these four elements together? So again, meditation really builds the capacity to work with your mind, be present with difficulty, be skillful. But meditation can keep you in your head if it's not balanced with movement. And then the movement piece reconnects you with your body, with your embodied wisdom, with the ground beneath all your strategies. But then movement alone can just become another way to push and perform if we're not held by the community. And the community can remind us that we're not alone, that we don't have to do all of this work in isolation, that we are wired to hold together in difficulty. But community can also become an echo chamber if it's not opened by creativity. And creativity accesses insight that your analytical mind can't reach. It connects you to something larger. It opens doorways to wisdom you forgot you had. But creativity can sometimes become self-indulgent if it's not grounded in meditation. So they all kind of cycle and work with each other. So you do see how that all kind of works together, that each one supports the other. Each one fills a gap that the others leave open. So this is why You can't just pick one. You need all four. Not in perfect balance every day, but integrated over time. Some days meditation carries you. Some days it's movement. Some days it's the community that you need to hold you. Some days it's creativity that opens you up to something you can't access in another way. And on the really hard days, when everything's falling apart and you can't do your full practice, you just find 5 minutes. Find 5 minutes of one element, and then that's enough. Because underneath it all, you know that you are building towards something bigger. It's seriously not about perfect routines. It's about staying connected to this larger ecosystem that holds you, that can always be there for you, always something that you can go back to. And here, as we round out, is really what it's all about. It's about sustainability, not for the next month, the next launch, the next big business presentation, but for a lifetime, for decades. Because if we want to do meaningful work in the world, if you're building something that matters, if you're showing up for people who need you, we cannot afford to burn out in 3 years. The future needs people who can sustain these things over the long term. Our kids need us, our businesses need us, our organizations need us, our families need us. This time, we need to get away from people who optimize everything, which is so many of our leaders are that way now, but people that have this grounded infrastructure and wisdom that can guide us into something different. And I hope that's what this ecosystem does. Again, not perfectly, not eliminating all difficulty from your life, but holding you and adapting and keeping you connected to what sustains you. I feel like in my work, I've worked for over almost 2 decades now in global institutions, universities, nonprofits, government agencies. We have never needed this change more than we need right now. So meditation, movement, community, creativity, not as separate techniques, but as an integrated system, not as a routine, not as a new habit, but as infrastructure that you can build your life on. So as we round out this month, I just encourage you all to reflect on, what is missing from your ecosystem. Maybe you have some of these pieces together. What are the areas that you want to work on? I'd love to hear what comes up for you, what your thoughts are. Feel free to share the video. Feel free to comment below. I love hearing from you guys. Thanks. Until next time.